is 9 News.
Good morning, everyone. There is breaking news this morning in Monument, Colorado. Department of Corrections Executive Director Tom Clements was killed in his home there last night. The suspect is still at large. This morning, Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper sent a statement to employees of the Colorado Department of Corrections informing them of the shooting. Part of that statement read, "I am so sad. I have never worked with a better person than Tom, and I can't imagine our team without him." The Colorado Springs Gazette reporting today that the shooting happened just after 8:30 last night. According to radio calls, Clements, who is 58, answered his door and was shot in the chest. Clements' home is on Colonial Park Drive near Higbee Road. It's in an upscale neighborhood in large lots of Fox Run Regional Park. And once again, that is in Monument. 9 wants to know. Investigative reporter Jace Larson continues our team coverage this morning. He's at the Colorado State Capitol. Jace.
Good morning, Gary. We've been talking to our sources this morning, and we're expecting that the governor will actually hold a news conference sometime between about 8 and 8:30 this morning. He wants to remember Tom Clements, just to put it simply. He does not plan, I'm told, to talk about the investigation that is going on outside of Monument. He's going to leave that to sheriff's deputies, but he does want to remember Tom Clements, a man who came to Colorado in January of 2011 to take over the job as executive director of DOC. When he came here, the DOC was going through budget cuts here that made it very difficult to try and staff prisons. They were having to close prisons, and he was brought in as someone to continue the mission of DOC, to continue trying to both keep inmates safe, but also keep the guards safe, again, with much less money than we'd had before. Before he came here, he served 31 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections.
And we have another update today in this shooting down in Texas that has an apparent connection now to the death of Colorado's head of corrections and also another death of a pizza driver that may somehow be connected to this same murder.
Homicide investigators from Colorado are on their way to Texas to look into this case. It involved a shootout and a crash. The suspect is considered clinically dead on life support at a hospital. Our 9 Wants to Know investigator Jace Larson has been following the latest developments. He's been telling us they're going to be doing rapid fire DNA, ballistics tests, because from the beginning, once we heard about the shootout, we heard about a gun. Let's get to Jace.
Yeah, so the information that I've just learned here in the past few minutes is that both Denver police and representatives from the Golden Police Department are headed to Texas. A Denver police person tells me that there is a strong connection, they believe, between the murder of a pizza delivery man a few days ago and the murder of Tom Clements. Again, that's the headline here, that they now believe, investigators now believe, there is a strong connection. It's not just questioning whether or not it is the case anymore. Now they definitely believe that's the case, and that's why they are headed to Texas to investigate.
And that may be how they got Tom Clements to open the door. We're going to follow up on that on 9 News at 6. NBC Nightly News is next.
9 Wants to Know has obtained a search warrant affidavit explaining what Texas sheriff's deputies discovered inside Evan Ebel's car. Ebel was killed after a high-speed chase and shootout. Melissa Blasius is live in Decatur, Texas with those details. Melissa?
Yeah, and some of this is a confirmation of the kinds of things that 9 News has been reporting since last night, that things are matching up. The type of handgun, the brand of bullets, the Domino's Pizza shirt or jacket, this dark, boxy Cadillac-type car. But to be sure about all of this, we will need a crime lab analysis, and that is going to go on, but it won't all be done today. In this Texas search warrant affidavit, a deputy sheriff reports what he saw in Evan Ebel's black Cadillac, the same brand of 9mm shell casings found when Department of Corrections Director Tom Clements was murdered Tuesday. And in the trunk of the car, a Domino's Pizza carrier and a Domino's Pizza shirt or jacket, a possible link to the murder of pizza delivery man Nate Leone on Sunday.
We're here in Texas to do follow-up. That's why we're here.
Evan Ebel died last night after a shootout with North Texas officers at the conclusion of a high-speed chase.
You start off at the scene, you back up 2 weeks, and then work your way back through it. So it will take some time.
Ebel was a member of a white supremacist gang active in Colorado prisons. Investigators say before Clements' murder, they were not aware of any threats from that group.
Obviously, his time in the Colorado Department of Corrections will be one slice of the criminal investigation that we'll have to take a look at. There is a lot of work ahead of all of the law enforcement agencies.
And we also want to share with you some information that we've gotten in just the last hour or so from DOC. They are saying now that Colorado prisons are on lockdown due to new security concerns. Prisoners are not allowed visitors and are being confined to their spaces, and that this is expected to last through the weekend. Of course, we will try to get more additional information about what specific new security concerns that they're worried about as this story continues to unfold and develop over the next hours and days. Back to you.
Investigators are saying for the first time officially that a man who was killed in a gunfight with Texas authorities is a suspect in the shooting death of Colorado State Prison System Chief. A spokesman with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office says evidence gathered in Texas after the death of Evan Ebel provides a strong lead in the shooting death of Tom Clements, the director of the Colorado Department of Corrections. 9 News sources say that the shell casings in the Texas crime matched the gun used at Clements' home. Investigators will not talk about that part publicly yet.
If we can link the weapon that we used in Texas to the weapon used here in Colorado, that would be a big step forward in our investigation.
Authorities hope to get the ballistics test results back on Monday, the same day a public memorial will be held for Mr. Clements. Investigators are looking at the evidence that could connect Ebel to the murder of a pizza delivery man as well. Nate Leone was married, he had 3 kids, and his family is inviting the public to his memorial service. Family members say the service for Nate Leone will start at 11 o'clock Wednesday morning at the Flatirons Church in Lafayette. Again, the public is invited to come. Investigators are trying to determine whether a Domino's pizza jacket and a pizza box found in Evan Ebel's car are connected to Leone's murder. This is our first chance to hear from Evan Ebel's father, Jack Ebel. He issued a statement this evening saying, quote, "I am profoundly saddened by the recent events involving my son, Evan Ebel, and offer my most sincere condolences to all of those individuals and families who have suffered from his actions." He goes on to write, "I ask for privacy for me and my family during this time as we grieve for the loss of life that has occurred and for all of those affected."
As this tragic story develops out of Texas and Colorado, connections between the suspect's father and Governor John Hickenlooper. Even before the governor knew of Evan Ebel's possible connection to the 2 Colorado murders, Hickenlooper made a reference to the suspect Wednesday morning. He credits Tom Clements for improving the prison system and reducing the number of inmates in solitary confinement, also known as ADSEG.
When I first interviewed him, we talked about was called administrative segregation. I'd had an old friend whose son had gone on the wrong track and been arrested and put into administrative segregation for a long period of time. This is, solitary confinement.
That friend, Jack Ebel, is a 30-year-long friend of the governor's, a well-respected oil and gas attorney who donated more than $1,000 to Hickenlooper's campaign. 9 Wants to Know found Ebel's son had a long history of felony gun crimes, from aggravated robbery, carjacking, and burglary. He was convicted of 3 felonies and sent to prison in 2005 and just got released in February. So far, the Department of Corrections has refused to disclose specific details about Ebel's release from prison, if it was an early release or if he served his full time. Given the nature of his father's political friendship, investigative reporter Jace Larson asked the governor if he had any influence over Ebel's prison time.
Did you play any role in him getting out of prison?
No, I'm saying I never talked to anyone, never specifically named him to anyone, didn't, A, Jack Ebel would have never asked me. B, I would never do it. And I would never, for a friend, I would not ask on Jack's behalf without telling Jack. I never discussed it with anybody. Tom Clements had never heard of Evan Ebel, didn't know he existed or know that I knew someone named Evan Ebel.
Larson then asked the governor about Jack Ebel's campaign contributions.
I want to give you a chance to answer this question, so please don't take offense to it. Can you assure Coloradans, even if he donated money to your campaign, that you played no role in any of this situation?
What a stupid question. Why would you even ask that question? I just got through telling you, right, that A, I wouldn't do it. I told you I didn't do it. So now you're asking me the question again? I mean, that's your choice, but you lose your ability to have access when you treat people like that.
Many of you have been sounding off about this interview on Facebook and Twitter. We thank you for your feedback. It's very important to acknowledge the governor has had a very difficult week with the tragic loss of a well-liked cabinet member. We should also acknowledge our role as government watchdogs. You expect us to ask tough, important questions even during tough times. About 30 minutes ago, the governor issued a full statement about his relationship with the suspect's father. We have that entire statement that he sent through email, 9news.com.
Yeah, one thing he says is that he just can't believe how this could all be connected. He's just shocked at all of that.
And it's been amazing how this has been connected. I mean, the developments in this case are just, it's almost unbelievable.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
9 News reporter Jace Larson has gone through the 24 pages of records, and Jace's records show Ebel served his entire sentence.
He did, Adele, nearly 8 years. Almost all of it was in solitary confinement. That's because these records show Ebel misbehaved over and over again. Ebel spent time in 4 Colorado prisons. In each, he struggled, eventually landing himself in solitary confinement. That's a cell alone with little human interaction. In all, he had 28 Code of Penal Discipline violations, which kept him in solitary confinement, known as ADSEG, until his release. While locked up, he threatened to kill a guard and his family, got into a fistfight, slipped out of handcuffs, and told a female staffer he would kill her if he ever saw her on the streets. He also said, according to records, that he would make her beg for her life. And last December, when staff gave him a score based on the likelihood that he would reoffend once he got out, he was classified as very high risk. But when it came to his release date on January 28th, the state says it had no choice but to release him. DOC Director Tom Clements wanted to avoid releasing people just like Ebel directly from ADSEG to the streets. The prison system put Ebel in a step-down program, but Ebel had disciplinary problems, so he never completed that program.
And we have breaking news tonight about the Evan Ebel case. 9 wants to know investigators have documents from the Department of Corrections that show Ebel was released possibly 4 years too early. Ebel is suspected of killing Department of Corrections Chief Tom Clements and pizza delivery driver Nate Leone. Ebel died after getting into a shootout with police, you may recall. Investigative reporter Jace Larson is joining us with new information. And Jace, is it possible that there was in fact a clerical error of some sort?
Well, that's what we are trying to figure out at this point. Within the past few minutes, we have confirmed that murder suspect Evan Ebel was released from prison early due to some type of error. He should have served an additional 4 years in prison for assaulting a prison guard. But somewhere between the plea agreement and the Department of Corrections, Evan Ebel's records were not coded to follow the plea agreement. On Thursday, DOC sent us this breakdown of Ebel's time in prison. It showed Ebel got 3 years in Jefferson County for breaking into a car. Then Adams County sentenced him to 8 years for carjacking a man and breaking into a home. Those sentences were supposed to be served at the same time starting in 2005. Well, then in 2008, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for getting out of handcuffs and punching a prison guard. This is where the problem appears to have occurred. Ebel pleaded guilty in that case. The plea agreement clearly says Ebel's sentence must be served consecutively or in addition to his other sentence. But it was entered into a computer system to show that sentence as concurrent or to be served at the same time. Ebel was released after nearly 8 years. Court records show after his 8 years, he should have begun serving his additional 4 years. It is not clear at this time how this happened. Quite frankly, we don't know where the change happened. We did talk to the prosecutor who worked on this case. He says while he does not remember the case specifically, he says it was never his policy to offer a concurrent sentence to someone already in prison. If the judge changed the sentence, that is not reflected in the court minutes. We are ordering a transcript of the sentencing to see exactly what the judge said during sentencing.
And Jace, I guess once these orders leave the courtroom, there's really nothing the Department of Corrections can do.
We're working to track down that information right now, but the Department of Corrections tells us that they are not allowed to change an inmate's sentencing information once it reaches them. A spokeswoman just told me on the phone that even if they believe that information is incorrect, they cannot do anything about changing it because that is what the law says they must do. They are not allowed to change it. However, I can tell you that until we called them today, they were not aware of what happened.
Jace Larson in the Information Center. Jace, thank you very much.
New information tonight on the so-called oversight that led to the early release of the man accused of murdering 2 men last month. Today, a Colorado district court apologized for what it called a clerical error that let Evan Ebel out of prison as many as 4 years too early. He was free fewer than 2 months before Colorado's Corrections Chief Tom Clements and Nate Leone were murdered. 9 Wants to Know investigator Jace Larson has been in Fremont County all day and has new information on what exactly was said during Ebel's sentencing. We begin, however, with the wife Nate Leone left behind. She is speaking for the first time on camera since her husband's murder. 9 News reporter Will Ripley joins us. Will, they were waiting for a call from the DA's office that never came.
That's right. Nate Leone's family says nobody from the court actually called them to apologize, so they had to hear it from us, the media. And tonight we heard for the first time from Leone's widow, who understandably is very angry about this clerical error that is believed to have led to her husband's murder.
Clerical error. Clerical error ain't going to bring my husband back. It's not going to bring Tom Clements back. It's not going to bring my children's father back. How do I tell my 4-year-olds, oh, Daddy was murdered because of a clerical error?
Outrage does not even begin to describe how Catherine Ann Leone is feeling.
Irate? How do you feel when something like this happens?
The man suspected of killing her husband, Nate Leone, should still be in prison. A Fremont County court made a mistake, a clerical error that led to Evan Ebel's release 4 years early. Police say Ebel killed Leone while he was delivering pizzas, and then they say he killed Department of Corrections Director Tom Clements.
I want to know who is going to stand up and be accountable, and I don't mean by saying we send condolences. Who's going to stand up and be accountable to my daughter, to my grandchildren?
Bernadette Allness says her son-in-law's death leaves his family feeling empty.
Does Nate fit in all these different places? A husband, a father, son, brother.
After 5 years of marriage, Leone's husband is gone.
He was the greatest person I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, by far.
His suspected killer would still be locked up if not for a clerical error.
A simple sorry ain't gonna suffice in my book. I'm a 30-year-old widow with 2 little 4-year-olds. That I have to go on the rest of my life explaining what happened to their dad, that this could have all been prevented. And it makes me sick, and it angers me something fierce to sit there and think this all could have been prevented.
Nate Leone worked full-time for IBM. He only delivered pizzas here 1 day a week. He did that to help earn some extra money for his family, to help pay for things like the vacation they just took to Disneyland. The night he died was his first night back to work here after that trip, Ebel.
All right, Will Ripley, thanks.
More now on the mistake that released Ebel years early. The error, first reported by 9 Wants to Know late last week, was confirmed today by the court administrator in Fremont County. He admits the court did not tell the prison system about Ebel's additional jail time ordered by a judge. Investigative reporter Jace Larson returns with new details on what went wrong when Ebel was sentenced in 2008.
This court sentencing transcript makes it clear the judge wanted Evan Ebel to spend 4 more years behind bars for assaulting a prison guard. But because of a mistake made by court personnel and a judge who finally signed off on this sentence, the Department of Corrections never got that message. Tonight, there's a push to make sure this type of thing never happens again.
I am confident that they will fix the problem going forward and that it won't happen again.
District Attorney Tom Ledoux prosecutes crimes that occur at prisons here in Canyon City. He wants to know if this mistake has been made before.
I think it's probably worth the effort to go back and make sure that we don't have any other cases out there where this problem has occurred before.
Ebel was already in prison for burglary and car theft when he punched a prison guard. He could have received 12 more years, but in exchange for pleading guilty, a judge agreed to give him 4 additional years. 9 Wants to Know reviewed the transcript of the sentencing. It clearly shows the judge wanted Ebel locked up, calling his actions stupid. Ebel tried to talk the judge out of even giving him 4 years. Ebel said he'd be 33 when he got out. I'm just saying 4 years is a little stiff, you know, Ebel told the judge. Well, the judge responded saying, if you hadn't done this, you'd be out when you're 29. And if you do this again, you probably won't get out until you're 40. The judge went on to say, you're never going to make it on the outside with the attitude you still have on the inside. Despite his words in court, the judge wasn't clear on the paperwork sent to the Department of Corrections. Because the paperwork didn't say consecutive on it, DOC assumed the sentence was supposed to be concurrent or served with his other time. It meant that Ebel did not serve a single extra day for punching the DOC guard. The review by the district attorney and the court administrator could start sometime this week. The Department of Corrections told me late tonight that when there's a question about a sentence, it does not always call to get clarification, but it is beginning its own policy review as well. In Fremont County, Jace Larson, 9 News.
Governor Hickenlooper says the state's corrections department will audit the records of all inmates to make sure that they are serving appropriate sentences. We have team coverage beginning with 9 Wants to Know's Jace Larson. He's live at the Department of Corrections in the Springs, and Jace, the doc, will now be going through hundreds of records. The DOC, I should say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When a prisoner assaults a corrections officer in prison, the sentence that that prisoner receives for that assault is supposed to be served in addition to whatever sentence he was already serving. Well, by mistake, Ebel was given a concurrent sentence and was not required to spend more time behind bars. There are 255 inmates currently serving time for assaulting a peace officer like Ebel did. Each of those cases will now be reviewed to see if any problems were made in that sentencing document. DOC is also going to look at every case where an inmate was sentenced and the judge didn't specify if the additional time should be served at the same time or if it should be served in addition to the current sentence.
If there's a question with those, we will consult with the Attorney General's office for contact to those sentencing courts to see if those orders need to be fixed.
The Department of Corrections also announced today that it is going to be asking the National Institute of Corrections to come in and review parole operations. When Ebel took off his ankle monitoring bracelet, it took 5 days before a parole officer actually showed up at his house. An arrest warrant was then issued the next day, but by then, 2 people had already been murdered.
It is a more complete and more disturbing picture of a troubled boy who grew into a convicted felon and suspected assassin. Evan Ebel's life ended in a shootout just days after police say he killed Nate Leon, a father of 3, and prison chief Tom Clements. 9 News has been looking through documents all evening that they received late today. This is 9 Wants to Know through Colorado's open records laws. In it, information that surprised our 9 Wants to Know investigators who have been covering this story from the beginning. Jace Larson begins our team coverage.
Adele, we looked through hundreds of pages of documents, and here are the 3 takeaways that we came up with. Prison officials were looking for Evan Ebel hours before he allegedly killed Tom Clements. In fact, they were searching his home. When Ebel was in prison, he was so bad that just 2 weeks before his release, he was not allowed to be around other inmates. And look at this. He started using alcohol and drugs at age 10. We know how Evan Ebel's criminal career ended in a shootout with Texas deputies just days after the state's top prison boss was gunned down at the front door of his Monument home. Now, we've learned his life of crime may have started long before. This pre-sentence report details his history of drug use that started in elementary school. Ebel admits to using alcohol and smoking pot at age 10. He'd moved on to cocaine by 12. And when most kids are learning to drive, Ebel had moved to using meth on a daily basis. In prison, Ebel became even more angry and violent, assaulting a fellow inmate and a guard. On this disciplinary form, instead of signing his name, he wrote "Kiss My White" expletive. From smearing feces on his prison cell door to threatening to kill staff, Ebel rarely followed the rules. He spent most of his prison stay in solitary confinement, alone in his cell 23 hours a day. He was found to be too angry and disruptive to be around other prisoners in a review just 2 weeks before he was released. Ebel was released on January 28th and violated his parole a month and a half later. Records show parole staff searched his father's home looking for Ebel just 4 hours before Clements was murdered. Well, it turns out that Ebel was released from prison 4 years too early. 9 Wants to Know broke the news. It was in fact a court error that allowed him to get out of prison too early. Now our investigation has prompted the state to take a look at other prisoner sentences to see if there are additional problems.
The murder of Colorado's prison chief shocked our state.
You all know that Tom was shot.
The prime suspect, Evan Ebel, had been out of solitary confinement less than 2 months before police say he killed Tom Clements as well as Nate Leon. a father of 3 working an extra job to support his family. Tonight, 9 wants to know investigator Jace Larson on what might have fueled Ebel's anger.
I've been here about almost a year now.
It's video of a young Evan Ebel years before he entered a Colorado prison. How did this smiling toddler become a suspected double murderer? Evan was born into a life that could have assured him success. His mom, a nurse, his dad, a lawyer with political connections. Evan's mom describes his caring nature in this letter to his soon-to-be-born sister.
He promises not to hit or bite. He's a good little guy. You'll really enjoy Evan, as he is quite a character and has a good sense of humor.
But happiness turned into anger. Evan's parents divorced. He started drinking and smoking pot at age 10. At 12, cocaine.
He used to sit up there on the porch roof.
Ebel had a reputation for trouble in his former Lakewood neighborhood.
I seen him launch out at his friends. His friends would come over and, pick him up, and he'd get really angry at them and, take a bat to their car. I mean, just really inappropriate anger.
Desperate for help, Ebel's parents sent him to a camp for troubled teens in Jamaica. When that didn't work, he went to a similar camp in Samoa.
That's the sign here, the only sign at Pacific Coast Academy.
It promised the ocean and beach while reforming kids. Did you ever go horseback riding?
No.
Did you ever go scuba diving?
Oh, no, nothing like that.
Helicopter rides?
Definitely not that. This was not tough love.
What were the conditions like there?
You were filthy, completely covered from head to toe in nasty dirts. Bugs were a huge problem.
Kurt Fry spent a year at the camp with Ebel, sharing a room.
He had this really, I'm a badass attitude. One time he grabbed a broom, broke it, and came in and started hitting on some kid named David for no reason. He just beat him up in the face.
This is Roxy.
These outbursts landed Ebel in Samoan isolation. No bed, no toilet.
I remember that in isolation. He would talk to himself a lot about when he goes to hell, he's going to talk with Adolf Hitler, and they're going to be angry at each other, just yelling back and forth.
This video documented camp conditions, including Ebel's claims of abuse.
All right, to put it basically, I've been hit about 7 times here. Been deprived of sleep for many nights, the most of which was about 4 nights straight.
What is isolation going to do to you?
Mary Ellen Johnson advocates against solitary confinement for children. She thinks Ebel's harsh treatment during his teenage years had lasting effects throughout his adult prison time.
One of the things that it will certainly do is to make you angrier and more psychotic. But if I were in Evan Ebel's place and looking back and remembering what it was like to be a teen, I don't think it would make me more docile. It would make me angrier.
I don't remember what I did wrong. I think I might have thrown a rock at some kid. I don't know. I've been deprived of food for the most at one point in time was a day, and that was because it was my first day in isolation.
Our isolation was hard work where you're getting beat.
It was Fry and other campers' complaints about the poor conditions and being kept in isolation that eventually caught the attention of the U.S. government.
Very unsanitary, very unhealthy.
Former U.S. diplomat Jim Derrick called the allegations serious at the time. He helped many of the kids get out.
It was absolutely not a place for anybody.
I'm so tired of being in Samoa.
Fry says what they were really doing was working for the camp, not being reformed.
We did the plumbing, we did the roads, we did the houses, we built the entire place from the ground up. It was a child labor camp.
When Ebel returned to the United States, he was anything but reformed, injecting and inhaling meth daily at age 16. Life didn't get any better when his sister died in a car crash. He stole a car, pistol whipped a guy, and broke into a house. Instead of shaping up when he landed in prison, he smeared feces on the wall and punched a guard. He acted so badly, he was kept in isolation until the day he was released. Evan Ebel was out just 7 weeks before we all learned his name.
I am certain that programs, including ours, Pacific Coast Academy, made him worse.
That camp cost as much as $3,000 a month. Kyle, that's really the going rate for camps that are similar to that one.
People are going to ask, do those camps exist here? Could the things that happen to the kids there happen in Colorado.
So there are camps for troubled youth in other places right here in the United States. However, when it comes to Colorado, most times it would not happen like it did there in Samoa unless someone was being supervised by a trained counselor and it was part of a documented treatment plan. That is the only time it is allowed here in Colorado. In fact, the state of Colorado just busted a home for troubled youth last week right here in our state for locking kids in seclusion for hours. However, kids who are tried and sentenced as adults can be put in administrative segregation in adult prisons.
And obviously that's an important tool that those folks in the prisons have, and then we start a whole separate discussion about that.
There is a lot of debate on whether or not that type of thing works here. Now, you saw the lady in our story saying that she doesn't believe it works. However, I interviewed Attorney General John Suthers, who used to be the Department of Corrections head. He says sometimes you have no other option. If you've got somebody who's violent against other inmates, violent against staff, what do you do if you don't remove them from population? He said, how could I go to a parent and say, your son or daughter was just injured because I didn't choose to remove a problem inmate from the rest of the population?
Parent of another prisoner, parent of a guard.
Exactly right.
All right, Jace, thank you so much.
Information just released to 9 Wants to Know shows more problems with prisoner sentencing. The governor ordered a review of prisoner sentences after 9 Wants to Know discovered the man suspected of murdering the head of Colorado's Department of Corrections and another man was accidentally released from prison early. Investigative reporter Jace Larson uncovered the court error that allowed Evan Ebel out 4 years early. So, Jace, how many more mistakes are we talking about now?
Well, already the state audit has discovered and fixed 56 problems with prisoner sentences, and this audit is only about 1/5 of the way through. There are more than 2,500 inmate records that the Department of Corrections says need a closer look. Today, the man who took over for Tom Clements sat down in an interview that you will see only on 9 News.
All of this review is essentially being done by hand.
The acting director of the Department of Corrections says he's not surprised by the number of problems discovered.
No, I'm not. And here's why. Sentencing laws are so complicated.
In addition to the 56 prisoner sentences with mistakes, there are 56 more cases where the court system is still investigating to see if there's a problem it needs to address. As of right now, they've looked at 362 records. There are many more to come. How do you fix these errors?
Learn what we can from these kinds of situations and do what we can to minimize the probability of something like this reoccurring.
The review is a step in fixing other errors, but Roger Werholt says because of how complex prisoner sentencing is, no system will be perfect.
As long as we're dealing with this level of complexity and dealing with human beings, it's never going to be a system where we can promise absolute certainty that those errors won't reoccur.
We mentioned the 56 problems that have now been fixed. Many of those were fixed when a court system looked at the sentencing document and was able to correct it to make it accurate. The sentencing problems affect inmates as well as people on parole and those living in halfway houses. Mark?
Jace, I thought once sentence was pronounced and the paperwork was done that nothing could be changed, but obviously that's not the case.
So in general, that is the case. However, if an inmate was supposed to serve their new sentence on top of what they were already serving, if that's what the law requires, and in some crimes it does, if that was not what was happening, though, it could be considered an illegal sentence. So again, if the law says you must serve that sentence in addition to whatever else you're serving, and that's not what the judge ordered, it can be changed because it was never a legal sentence in the beginning.
I see. All right. Jace Larson in the Information Center. Jace, thank you very much. Also today, the state announced that it has found many more mistakes as it reviews inmates' sentences. The governor demanded a review of prisoner sentences after 9 Wants to Know investigator Jace Larson discovered that murder suspect Evan Ebel was released from prison 4 years too early. He is thought to have murdered 2 people just 7 weeks after his release. Jace Larson is joining us now. And Jace, the number of problems found has now topped 100.
Yeah, that's right. We got the newest numbers just a few hours ago. The state court system has reviewed 694 cases that the Department of Corrections asked judges to look at because DOC thought there was a possibility of an error. Of those, the state court system has found 129 mistakes. No mistakes were found in 565 of the cases. The state still has 691 cases to review. The Department of Corrections spokeswoman who we talked with today says the number of errors could go up because more cases might be added to this review.
We're about 3/4 of the way through our review, and as we see cases that require further review and examination by the courts, we're sending those along to them.
This review is a long one. It started in April. It's not expected to be done until July. Mark?
It's just astonishing. Initially, we thought, well, maybe they would find a few errors, but in fact, this has just been a tsunami of errors. And your investigation into this now alleged murderer who was accidentally released from prison is also getting action at the state capitol.
Yeah, last week, the governor signed a bill into law which aims at preventing mistakes, just like the one that let Evan Ebel go free. Whenever there's a question about a sentence being concurrent or consecutive to another prison sentence, the Department of Corrections must now get clarification from the courts. In the past, if a judge didn't note concurrent or consecutive, the prison system entered that sentence as concurrent. And Mark, that's what we saw that allowed Evan Ebel to get out those 4 years too early.
And Jace, I think a lot of people, and I speak for myself as well, there are a lot of us who just don't think that this is that difficult a thing to get that right.
You know, a lot of people say that, and it is very tough because as the laws change, so 10 years ago, if you committed crime A, you might be sentenced to, let's say, a minimum of 10 years. Well, that same crime, once the law changes, there might be a 20-year minimum sentence. And so as these people are going through, they're having to balance all that type of different law changes. I'm told it is very, very tough to do that. In the end, though, here, it's really the court system that made this mistake. It was an error in the court system when they didn't mark that they really wanted him to serve a consecutive sentence when he assaulted that prison guard. Instead, they marked it as concurrent, and essentially he served no additional time for assaulting that prison officer.
Yes, all right. Well, more complex than we think then. All right, Jace Larson in the Information Center. Jace, thank you very much.